Cooperation with our European friends will not stop in March.
And welcome back to All Out Politics in Brussels. This is the Prime Minister live now, giving her news conference at the end of this European summit.
To promote our shared interests and values. Nowhere is this more important than in our approach to the global challenges we face. Whether security and defence, migration or foreign policy issues, we face common opportunities and risks, and we must continue to address them together. As I've said before, the UK is unconditionally committed to the security and defence of Europe. We share the vision of a strong, secure and successful EU with global reach and influence, an EU capable of countering shared threats to our continent, working alongside a confident, outward-looking UK. Yesterday, we discussed a range of subjects, including migration, the digital economy, and some of the most pressing foreign policy issues, such as North Korea and Iran. We stand united in our clear condemnation of North Korea's aggressive and illegal missile and nuclear tests, and urge all states, including China, to play their part in changing the course Pyongyang is taking. On Iran, we have reiterated our firm commitment to the nuclear deal, which we believe is vitally important for our shared security. And last night at dinner, I spoke to my fellow leaders about my vision for a new deep and special partnership between the UK and the European Union after Brexit. A partnership based on the same set of fundamental beliefs in not just democracy and rule of law, but also free trade, rigorous and fair competition, strong consumer rights, and high regulatory standards. I am ambitious and positive for Britain's future and for these negotiations, but I know we still have some way to go. Both sides have approached these talks with professionalism and a constructive spirit, and we should recognise what has been achieved to date. The UK and the EU share the same objective of safeguarding the rights of EU nationals living in the UK and UK nationals living in the EU. EU citizens have made a huge contribution to our country, and let me be clear that whatever happens, we want them and their families to stay. While there are a small number of issues that remain outstanding on citizens' rights, I'm confident that we are in touching distance of a deal. On Northern Ireland, we've agreed that the Belfast Agreement must be at the heart of our approach, and that Northern Ireland's unique circumstances demand specific solutions. It is vital that joint work on the peace process is not affected in any way. It is too important for that. And both sides agree that there cannot be any physical infrastructure at the border and that the common travel area must continue. We have both committed to delivering a flexible and imaginative approach on this vital issue. This Council is an important moment. It is a point at which to assess and reflect on how to make further progress. My speech in Florence made two important steps which have added a new impetus to the negotiations. I gave a firm commitment on the financial settlement, and I proposed a time-limited implementation period based on current terms, which is in the interest of both the UK and the EU. Both sides agree that subsequent rounds have been a new spirit. My fellow leaders have been discussing this morning, and I believe that it is in the interests of the UK that the EU27 continues to take a united approach. But if we are going to take a step forward together, it must be on the basis of joint effort and endeavour. We must work together to get to an outcome that we can stand behind and that works for all our people. Thank you. Now I'll take a few questions. Let's start with the BBC.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Do you deny that you've made clear to your EU counterparts that you are willing to pay many more billions than you've already indicated to settle our accounts as we leave?
What I've made clear to my EU counterparts in relation to financial contribution is what I set out in my Florence speech, which is that I have said that nobody need be concerned for the current budget plan, that they would have to either pay in more or receive less as a result of the UK leaving, and that we will honour the commitments that we have made during our membership. Now, there has to be detailed work on those commitments, as David Davis has said. We're going through them line by line and will continue to go through them line by line, and the British taxpayer wouldn't expect its government to do anything else. And Tom.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Tom Newton-Dunn from The Sun. The deal that is now on the table for the December summit is quite clear, isn't it? It's if you detail further your thinking on what commitments you mean and what you're prepared to pay for, the EU27 will move on to the next phase. Are you prepared to spell out any more details to them, to us, to anybody on what you want to pay for?
No, what we are doing as we look across the weeks coming up to the December Council is looking at a range of issues on which we are still, some of which we're, as I say, in touching distance of an agreement, such as on citizens' rights. I believe that's important because I have always made clear that I think that citizens' rights should be a top priority. And as I've just said in answer to the first question on the financial issue, we will be going line by line through those commitments. I'm positive and optimistic about where we can get to in relation to the future partnership that we want with the European Union, because it's not only in the interests of the British people, it's in the interests of people across the remaining 27 members of the European Union as well. And as I understand it, following the discussion that has taken place this morning, we will see the EU considering their response into the Florence speech in terms of the sort of vision that they have for the partnership that we can have for the future. But I'm optimistic it will be a good one, because it will be one that will be to the benefit of people across the United Kingdom and the rest of the European Union. Faisal.
Prime Minister, if your Brexit Secretary is preparing upbeat presentations on no deal for the Cabinet, and if your Foreign Secretary is saying that the United Kingdom could cope very well, why shouldn't EU citizens also prepare for no deal? And why shouldn't business groups, cars, aviation, nuclear industry also prepare their contingency plans for no deal as well?
Well, I've been clear that we're working for a good deal, and I'm optimistic about getting that. But as I've said, and as others have said consistently, it would be irresponsible for the British government not to look across at the changes that will be necessary regardless of the eventuality. And indeed, some of the changes that would be necessary in the event of a no deal will be the same as changes that will be made in relation to us achieving a deal. And when the Cabinet comes to look at this, it will be looking across the board at what work is being done across government departments for all eventualities. And that includes for getting the good deal, the positive deal that I'm confident that we can achieve and that we've seen from European leaders here believe is achievable as well. Rowena.
Prime Minister, is it conceivable that when the negotiators have finished going through line by line all the budget contributions and financial commitments, that total sum could be as high as €60 billion?
I've been very clear on where we are in relation to the financial settlement. I've set out the reassurance to our European colleagues in relation to the current budget plan, and we will go through that line-by-line issue in relation to the commitments that we have made in our membership. And of course, I've also said in the past that if there are particular projects or programmes that we wish to continue to be a member of, then of course we would look to paying relevant costs in relation to that. Programmes such as on science and research and perhaps in some of the criminal justice issues. Now, I'll take a couple more, and I'll take a couple from some of our European colleagues. Yes. Well, you're all, yes, but non-British news media.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Naira Chehich, Bloomberg TV. I spoke to the opposition leader, Jeremy Corbyn, yesterday, and with relation to the Brexit bill, he said he couldn't put any sort of number on it. Now, I understand you're working on the number, but your EU colleagues do want a more clear and a more detailed negotiating position before they can move on to trade talks. You're working on it. When do you expect to be able to put a number on that Brexit bill? Time is of the essence.
Yeah. I've been very clear all along, as the United Kingdom has all along throughout this, that the full and final settlement will come as part of the final agreement that we're getting in relation to the future partnership. And I think that's absolutely right. I think that can only be done in that particular context. I made that point within the Florence speech, and that point remains. Yes. This will be the last one.
James Frenny from Euronews. A question on Catalonia, please. Catalonia's leader has threatened to declare independence if Madrid doesn't engage in dialogue. The Parliament's split on the issue, so is Catalan society, and the economic consequences of splitting from Spain are somewhat unclear. What advice have you got for Carlos Puigdemont?
I have spoken to Mariano Rajoy this morning, as I did earlier this week, and made clear that the United Kingdom's position is very clear. We believe that people should be abiding by the rule of law and uphold the Spanish Constitution. Thank you.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.